Hi everyone, sorry for the slightly late start. I've had a few technical issues just for a change. Um, Hope we're all good at the moment. Um, what I will do is get straight onto the questions, I think. I hope this is working okay. Doesn't see, hold on. Oh, we've got someone watching. Let me just double check this is working okay because I've had some issues tonight for some reason. Yeah, it seems to be. Right, okay, that's good. So I'll get straight on with the questions then. The first one is I'm doing okay, but then I get the odd I'm going to miss having a drink with hubby on the balcony on holiday, that sort of thing. It's only a brief thought, but it's my biggest worry of failure. So I think there's a few things to say on that. Firstly, if they're your only issues you're having, then you're doing extremely well because those kind of drinks on the balcony on holiday tend to be the most difficult things that we try to get to grips with when we stop drinking. They're kind of the, like the definitive drinking situations. So, and actually, there's a bit of a conversation after it, and I think the author says, I think once I experience it, I will feel better, and I think that's exactly that. We have these definitive drinking situations that we can't really envisage going through without drinking. Um, but actually, what we usually find is when you do go through them not drinking, you enjoy them just as much as you ever did anyway. So experience is a very important part of that. But don't forget as well, a lot of when we think about drinking, it's the idea and not the reality. It's a fantasy, and that's essentially what a craving is. It's fantasizing about how good it will be to have a drink. So often when we're thinking about drinking, we set up some ridiculously idyllic situation like the balcony on holiday or Christmas or whatever. And a lot of the time it's just worth injecting a bit of reality into it. So, if you're on a balcony on holiday, chances are it's a very nice situation anyway, a nice view, it's nice weather, you've got no worries or anything on a day-to-day basis. Just keep in mind what alcohol is. It's a poison, a drug that just makes you feel slightly dulled, and when it wears off you feel anxious, and then another dose of it relieves that anxiety feeling. So that's not going to do anything if you're sat there on a balcony on holiday enjoying yourself. Um, but don't forget, I think if they're the only concerns you've got, you're doing extremely well. And yes, experience is one of the big things. So I think when you actually go through it, you'll probably feel a lot better anyway. And it sounds like you're doing very well apart from that. So I've got no doubt you're going to absolutely smash that. Someone said focus on what else needs to happen besides not putting poison in your body. What needs to happen to maintain sobriety? So I think the problem with alcohol, because it is a sedative and an anaesthetic, so it anaesthetises feelings. So it tends, like if you're worried or unhappy, it will anaesthetise those to a limited degree before, albeit making them even worse when it wears off. Because it has this sedating effect, over the years when we drink, we tend to use it as stress relief and a way with dealing with the good times and the bad times. So a lot of the time when you've been drinking for a few years, that's your natural stress release. So if you have a bad day or something unpleasant happens, you immediately reach for a drink. Now, I think cutting out alcohol, obviously that's the main thing, but the problem is life is a lot better when you're not drinking all the time. It's just massively better, but it is still life, and life has its good and bad days. And I think the problem is a lot of people, they quit drinking, but they don't have a plan in place for when the bad days hit. And so there's a sort of a natural reaction that you stop drinking and it's all going well, but then something terrible happens and you haven't really got a plan in place of how you deal with that stress. So for me, that would be the main one. I think you need that plan. You need to expect things to go badly on one or more days over the next however many years. Basically, the rest of your life is not going to be perfect. It's going to be better, but you're going to have some very bad days because everyone does. And you need to plan what you are going to do when you have those bad days. So it could be, I don't know, exercise or speaking with a friend or meditation or yoga. So any one of those things, but have your plan in place. It might just be sticking the TV on or opening a book or something, but you need that plan in place for when the bad times come, because they will come. That is life. Life consists of ups and downs. The other thing I think to maintain sobriety is you need to maintain that outlook constantly, because don't forget how ambition works. So ambition is there's a natural tendency in human beings and indeed all living things to want to improve their life. And that's made up of two distinct parts for humans. It's made up of being fairly critical of what we own and idolising what we don't have. So when you're drinking, you're stuck with the reality of drinking and you don't like it. People who are drinking regularly and drinking heavily aren't happy. Whether they accept that they've got a problem or they don't, they're not in a particularly happy place. Even so-called normal drinkers are not as happy as they would be were they not drinking. So it's easy to be very critical of it and to want to get sober. But then, of course, when you stop, you've got sobriety and you start to idolise your drinking. So that's how the cravings kick in. That's what I was talking about a little bit earlier about. It's the idea and not the reality of alcohol that drags us back in. You start thinking of those idyllic drinking situations. And of course, the other main thing that I think is very important to bear in mind, when you go through the alcohol withdrawal, so just to recap, alcohol is a sedative, so it anaesthetises things, it sedates things, it inhibits nerve activity, so you feel more relaxed when you've had a drink. But the brain tries to maintain a chemical balance. So when you increase the depressant, the sedative side of things, your brain becomes hypersensitive, so it can still work while under the sedating effects of the alcohol. Okay, so your brain becomes hypersensitive, so it can work okay under the alcohol, and then the alcohol wears off, and you're left overly sensitised, and that, in extreme cases, is the shakes and DTs and what you think of as the really bad alcohol withdrawal. But even 1 or 2 glasses of wine, it still has an effect. It's very minor, and a lot of people live and die without even realising it's there. But it is there, and it's a feeling of anxiety. But what it really does, it erodes your mental resilience. It erodes that feeling that you can get out there and deal with things. So the problem is, when you stop drinking, you start to get your old confidence back, and you start to get on top of things, and you forget what it's like to not be able to do that, because one of the problems with alcohol is it robs you of your ability, your mental resilience, and mental resilience is what you need when you want to quit drinking. So we find it incredibly hard to stop drinking while we're within that drinking cycle, and very soon, a few days afterwards, when your brain chemistry gets back to normal, your confidence starts to improve and you start to feel better, and as the days turn into weeks and maybe months and even years, you forget how difficult it is, and that sort of mental timidity, if you like, of being in that situation. So, and again, that ties back to what I was saying before, you need to be on guard for this. So this is something that is constantly going on. And don't forget, if we think about addiction as, and I'm talking about any addiction here, it's essentially the addict needing or believing they need their drug of choice to cope with and enjoy life. Okay, and that's the basis of addiction. And if that's the case, then alcohol is by far the most addictive substance on the planet, because it's alcohol more than any other drug out there, where we're constantly daily bombarded with images of, people socialising and drinking. You see it on social media, you see it on Instagram, Facebook, you see it on TV, you read about it in books, people socialising and drinking or dealing with stress and drinking, whatever it is. So we're constantly bombarded with that underlying message that alcohol is a natural part of our lives and you need it to cope with life and enjoy life. So it is very difficult. You need to maintain your sobriety and you need to work on it. You should enjoy it. You shouldn't be spending as much time in recovery as you dedicated to your drinking. You should have that time back to enjoy, but you do need to be on guard, because you are constantly bombarded with images of people being happy and drinking and all the rest of it. We know it's false, but as time goes by, it will have an effect on you. In your live last week, you referred to people just not wanting to drink or not being affected by alcohol, even, for example, after taking night nurse. How did you get to that stage? How do you change your mindset, and how long did it take? So it differs from person to person, frankly. So for me, changing my mindset was essentially the information that's in Alcohol Explained 1 and 2. Not just that, to be honest, because I've read a lot of other quit lit, and I don't think I've ever read any book on quitting drinking that I've not got something out of. I've read Jason Vale, Alan Carr, Simon Chappell, Annie Grace, Catherine Gray, and the Sober Diaries. I can't remember her name now. Claire Pooley, that's it. And I get something from all of them. So as I say, for me, it was mainly what was in Alcohol Explained. But different people need different things. And also what I would say is the old way of quitting drinking was you stop and you grit your teeth and you crave alcohol, but you just get through one day at a time as best you can and just limp through to midnight each day. We're finding better and better ways of going, and if you can change your outlook so that you don't want to drink, that's the ideal. And obviously the holy grail is to be in a position where you never, ever, ever want to drink. But like the first comment there was someone saying they're kind of getting a tweak about sitting with their husband on the balcony on holiday. If that's all you have to deal with, that one tiny thing, it's great. So the ideal is you never ever want to drink alcohol, but most people will not get that. But if it's just a very tiny twinge every so often, it's not a massive problem anyway. But in terms of changing mindset, as I say, for me it was Alcohol Explained. I assume a lot of people, as they're on the group, found similar. But I don't think many people, even people that really like Alcohol Explained, for them it wasn't the only book. There's other books, not just books as well. There's programs, different ways of looking at things. So I would say just keep going, keep reading things, keep talking to people. And it's not just people who've written books either. You can get a huge amount of information just by reaching out to other people. I've spoken to lots of people at AA meetings, and a lot of people have said things that have stuck with me throughout. And, another brick in my wall of sobriety, if you like. But what I would say is a lot of this for me is about idolising things and creating kind of a ridiculous situation that doesn't exist. And we do that, like going back to what I said before, it's the idea and not the reality of drinking that drags us in. And in fact, someone posted on the group the other day about how, I can't remember what she said now, but she was unhappy or annoyed about something, so she had a drink and it didn't do anything, it didn't stop her being unhappy or annoyed, and of course it won't do. But that's the thing, we get angry at something and annoyed and upset, and we have this idea that we're going to sit down and have an alcoholic drink and all our troubles and all the worries of the world will just dissolve away. But of course they don't, because when you have a drink, all those problems are still there. And in fact, if you're committed to stopping drinking and you have a drink, not only do you have all those problems, but then you've got all the misery and guilt because you're drinking again. So actually you feel worse from the off. So I think, again, it's just being realistic. And again, think about the lady on the balcony with her husband on holiday. What's she losing by not having an alcoholic drink? So, I'm seeing about some of the comments here. Oh, I see. Yeah, no, sorry, I'll deal with the comments afterwards. They're a bit distracting. But yeah, so I think it's worth just bearing that in mind, that a lot of this is just, it's not real, a lot of it. It's like smoke and mirrors. And I think if you can stick to the reality and keep driving yourself back to the reality, that's a fantastic way of doing it. The next question is a good one. Are you able to talk a little about binge drinking and how that affects you? I'm someone who can go a long time without it, but then finds it very hard not to drink, usually to black out for one night. This feels different to when you talk about heavy drinking, needing the next drink to feel relaxed. I can go days, weeks, and then we'll go huge for one night, and the crash after that is horrendous. So that's a really good one, because actually I was a binge drinker. I think there was only a maximum of 3 or 4 months in my entire 25-year drinking career when I drank on consecutive days. For me, it was mainly weekend drinking, and it is a slightly different dynamic because you take the drug, you have the withdrawal, you recover for a few days, and then you start again. So it's not like daily drinking when you're constantly relieving the alcohol withdrawal from the previous drinking. So it is slightly different, but don't forget there's another element to craving, which is where you kind of obsess with something. So from my perspective, so I would drink at weekends. So I'd have a horrendous hangover Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, or, Tuesday, Monday, Tuesday if I was drinking on Sunday, and then Tuesday, Wednesday if I was drinking on Monday as well, which is how it sort of ended up towards the end. But so I would stop then, and then the problem is if your weekend is built around drinking, for example, like mine was, as soon as the weekend came, you'd be thinking about having a drink, and then it sort of takes on a world of its own then, because if you're thinking about something, so say I go to a party, and I want a drink there, I'm not relaxing, I'm not enjoying the party, I'm not doing anything. All I'm doing is thinking about that drink. So I'm not relaxing, I'm not having a good time with my friends, I'm not doing anything. If I'm at home with the family and I'm thinking about having a drink, I'm not thinking about what the kids are doing or enjoying my time with them or having a nice meal. I'm not doing anything other than thinking about drinking. And when I finally have that drink, I no longer have to obsess about having one and wanting one. So you can then get on with enjoying the day, enjoying your family, enjoying the weekend, enjoying time with your friends, whatever it is. So that's a slightly different dynamic, but it still works very powerfully, because it's in that situation, drinking is the difference between living your life and enjoying it, or not living your life and having a fairly miserable time. So it is a slightly different dynamic. And what I would find is on the Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, when I came out of the drinking, I'd felt absolutely horrendous. And then a couple of days later, I'd be okay, and then I'd get a good night's sleep and I'd feel hugely better. And then I was ready to go again. So there's that dynamic as well. You kind of come out the other end thinking, what on earth am I doing to myself? This is ridiculous. But in a few days' time, it's almost like a Jekyll and Hyde thing. You're a completely different human being, laughing it all off and ready to go again on the next Friday. But don't forget as well, so the reason, if you're asking about why you have a lot when you go for it, I think there's a few points there. One is, and this is what I would do, because I didn't drink all week, I would feel completely justified in drinking as much as I wanted over the weekend, because I didn't drink all week. But there's a physiological element as well, because don't forget, whenever you take a drink, it wears off, leaving a corresponding feeling of anxiety, and then you need another drink to get rid of that feeling of anxiety. So when you're drinking like that, you need to keep drinking to keep relieving that feeling of anxiety. And so the natural tendency for most people is to drink loads and loads and loads. It's difficult to do that if you're drinking every day, and people who drink every day tend to try and hold back a bit. Whereas if you're like me and you're just, your weekend is dedicated to drinking, you've got no reason not to, so you tend to just throw it down your neck like it's going out of fashion. So there is a slightly different dynamic there, but in many ways it's not entirely different. And when you say about the crash afterwards horrendous, it is absolutely, it's deeply unpleasant. But I would worry less about, if you're thinking about stopping for good, think less about the crash and concentrate more on it when you do actually have the drink. Because the regular drinker, when they have a drink, they do get a boost because they're relieving the anxiety and the tiredness caused by the previous drinks. When we binge drinkers have that first drink on a Friday night, we don't even get that benefit. It does just make you feel slightly dulled. So where I would say with you, what you should do next time you have your big binge, try to really concentrate on what the alcohol is actually doing for you, because it will be a bit of an eye-opener, particularly those first couple of drinks. It's not a particularly good feeling. And if you can possibly do it, have those first few drinks on your own, no music, no TV, no nothing, and just really concentrate, no friends, no nothing, just on your own, and concentrate really on what that feeling is. And it's quite an eye-opener. It's not a particularly pleasant feeling at all. It's a feeling of being slightly dulled and confused, and you get a bit of tunnel vision, and that's it. Low mood and how it makes you want to shortcut it by using alcohol. I think that kind of goes back to what I was saying before about you need to have your plans in place for when you have a bad day, and how to do something about it without turning to alcohol, because low mood, whether it's low mood or you've had some bad news or you're upset or angry or whatever it is, the alcohol will dull you for a few minutes and then you'll have a corresponding feeling of anxiety. So a lot of the time the alcohol won't actually change your mood anyway. It's a sedative and a depressant, and if you've got a low mood it won't do anything apart from make you feel slightly dulled and miserable and then make you feel anxious, so you don't even get that benefit. But even if it does give you some kind of boost, you then get a corresponding anxiety feeling afterwards. Doing something like exercise, going for a cycle or a run, you will feel genuinely better afterwards. And reading a book or something, you're at least taking your mind out of the present, going somewhere else with it and finding a bit of peace and tranquility. All alcohol will do is to obviously push your heart rate up massively and your cortisol and stress levels, and ruin your night's sleep as well. The next question here, there's a few of these actually. Dopamine receptors, how long for them to recover, or even will they after years of drinking? So I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about dopamine. So dopamine, when it originally was discovered and linked to addiction, people thought dopamine was a drug that made you feel good. Okay, the current theory behind dopamine is it's not something that makes you feel good, it's a motivator. Okay, so if you're sat there and you're like, so I do this where I can't sit still because I keep seeing things that need doing. And a lot of the time when I was drinking, I wouldn't do that. I would just sit there and ignore stuff. Okay, alcohol sedates, and it sedates your feelings that you need to get up and tidy up or do this or do that or do the other. So one of the ways your brain counters it is to go the other way, to increase your motivation to do things, so that when your alcohol wears off, you're overly motivated. And that's what dopamine is. Dopamine makes you want to do things. That's why a lot of the time when people wake up after drinking, they might want to eat loads, and the other thing people sometimes want to do is have sex. And that's dopamine. It makes you want. Whether it's food, more alcohol, sex, whatever it is, it makes you want things. It's not a particularly good thing in many ways, and it certainly causes overeating. So dopamine in that sense isn't maybe what the question you're asking. You might be asking about, so when you socialise, you feel good. So there's a your brain drops chemicals into you to actually make you feel good. And because we socialise a lot when we're drinking, we tend to confuse that with alcohol. And a lot of people will say that alcohol causes your brain to release these substances to make you actually feel good, but it doesn't. Okay, it's only because we tend to drink in situations where we're enjoying ourselves anyway. That's why you start to feel good in it. And again, going back to what I said before, if you drink your normal drinks, sat at home alone with no TV, no radio, no people, nothing, just a room, sat there drinking, you'll have a very different experience of drinking than if you were out with your friends or had some music on or whatever it is. So if you're in any doubt about that, drink with no other external stimuli and see what a different experience it is. Someone's put, hi, what strategies to put in place when you get a very strong craving? I'm doing well, but had a 4-day relapse a couple of weeks ago. I think I've kind of spoken about this. For me, craving is fantasizing. It's a fantasy, and it's idolizing something, so it's not real. And for me, reality is the most important thing. People will say to play it forwards, which is very good. So think about waking up at 3 a.m, feeling awful, and then feeling tired and drained all the next day. But I think it's quite powerful to play it forward even to when you've had that first drink. Because, as I say, when you get to the stage where you realise that having that first drink is not going to be sat there with all the worries in the world floating away and you feeling completely happy and over the moon about everything, you're going to be just as miserable as you were before you had the drink, only you'll be more miserable because then you'll have all the guilt and worry because you're drinking again. So you won't feel better for it. And I think when you get to that stage, you start to just stop wanting to drink, but you do need to keep dragging yourself back to reality. How are we doing for time? Okay, half an hour. The next one, whilst I know alcohol is killing me, social isolation is tough to deal with. I'm currently detoxing in hospital as rehabs won't accept me due to post-trauma and alcoholism. The psychiatrist with basically what I call abuse. Some may say tough love, basically telling me the truth, drinking is killing me and I need rehab or home visits, community support, which is not available where I live, as the services are uncomfortable with post-trauma, so I've had to find an AA sponsor, only option, or I get yelled at again. What are your thoughts? So if it's the only option, it sounds like you haven't got an awful lot of choice. If you're being forced to go to AA and you're not happy with it, there's other sponsors out there. So, and I know there's a lot of talk sometimes in the group about AA. AA isn't, it's not a single beast. It's a group, a very, very big group of human beings. Some bad, no doubt, many very good. So if you're not happy with it, try to find another sponsor or other people you can talk to. You said in there as well that they're not interested in Alcohol Explained or what it is. That's not a good sign, because to my mind, a good sponsor would bring out the best in you and your sobriety. So whatever it is you say you find helpful, he or she should maybe take an interest in it, and even if not read it themselves, at least encourage it in you if you find it helpful. And I know from personal experience there are sponsors like that out there. So you might not, if AA is the only option, you're stuck with it. But you could try another sponsor. I'm sure there must be other ones. And don't forget, in today's day and age, it's all online. You can reach out to anyone over the entire planet. So it might be worth doing that. So someone's put in here time frames for dopamine and other neurotransmitter balance. So again, I've made some comments on dopamine, but in terms of your brain chemistry going back to normal, there's a few processes. So if, say you coming out of a massive drink now, and you're going to say to yourself, right, I'm never going to drink again. The question is, you're going to feel awful for a few days, but when are you going to start to feel better? So the first thing that needs to happen if you just finished your last drink is you need the alcohol to be processed. And that will depend on how much you've drunk, but usually about 24 hours is a good indicator. Even if you've had a right old skinful, you should be getting there in about 24 hours. Really, that's not the problem though, because the problem is when the alcohol wears off, and you're left with that oversensitization, and that's where the anxiety and what colloquially is known as anxiety. So that kind of anxious feeling you get when you stop drinking, that can go on for, it's worst for the first 24 hours. So even if you're coming out of a massive binge, the first 24 hours is when you will suffer the most. You can expect to not sleep at all. So when I finally stopped, I just couldn't sleep at all for 24 hours. It was just impossible. And that's due to that oversensitization. And then on the second night, I got a bit of sleep and a bit more on the third night. And I finally got back to sort of a normal-ish position after about 5 days. And speaking to other people, that's usually about the outside. So you could expect to get back to normal. So that period where you go to sleep and you can't sleep and you're not eating properly and you find it very difficult, very anxious all the time, that's about 5 days, worst case. So if you're someone who's drinking a bottle of wine a night, it won't be that long. But 5 days is about the outside. After that, you will need a few days to get a decent night's sleep under your belt, and then you'll start to feel more human. If you're a regular drinker, you've got another stage to go through, because if you're drinking every 24 hours or so, your brain's constantly in a period of overstimulation because the alcohol never really wears off. So when you finally stop for good, your brain stops being in that oversensitization, but because you're used to being there, you get really tired. So it's equivalent of if you drank 7 or 8 cups of strong coffee every day for a few years and then stopped, you'd be really tired for a bit while your brain got back to normal. So regular drinkers can have a few weeks where they just feel tired and drained all the time and really lethargic. And again, it's just that final part of the brain chemistry getting in. The longest I've known anyone have that for is a month. Okay, so your worst case scenario for an alcohol, from going from finishing last drink now to getting back to some semblance of normality, is worst case 5 or 6 weeks, with the first 24, 48 hours being the worst of it, and then it getting progressively better afterwards. Do alcohol-free beers trigger dopamine? Another one about dopamine, and if so, does this prolong the natural neurotransmitter balance after stopping alcohol? So this is a very interesting one. There was a big thing in the press a while ago about alcohol-free beers trigger dopamine. So there was some scientific studies done, and they got some previous heavy drinkers, and they gave them alcohol-free beer, and they noticed their dopamine increasing. So there was this big hoo-ha about, alcohol-free beer can make you feel good, but actually dopamine doesn't make you feel good. They're confusing what these drugs actually do. It actually makes you feel more tense. So what that suggests is, if you are a previous heavy drinker, you can actually cause yourself problems by drinking alcohol-free beers. Now, there's a few caveats around that, and actually it's a bit complicated, and I would urge anyone who's interested in this to go on the website. There is an article on there where I deal with this in a lot of detail. But your brain will go into that recalibration process of oversensitization, not only when it senses alcohol in the system, but when it expects to have some. So I think the problem is, if somebody is a heavy beer drinker, for example, and they drink an alcohol-free beer, that can be the trigger for their brain to start going into oversensitization. And I think that's what's shown by these studies that show that previous heavy drinkers who drink alcohol-free beer can have their dopamine increased. So it's a concern. But having said that, I drink alcohol-free beer and I don't have a problem with it. And it might be that I know there's not alcohol in it, and I'm not sure about how these studies were actually performed. Or it might be that it did do that to me for the first few times, but I've had so many of them, my brain is no longer triggered by it. What I would say is, if you're in any worry about it at all, don't have it. You don't need alcohol-free beer to quit drinking. And if you have it and you don't have a problem with it, then don't worry about it. I went out one time and I had a pint. I went to the pub and I had a pint of it. I think Adnam's Ghost Ship, and it's 0.5% alcohol. And it didn't really particularly bother me, but I found I was really anxious the following day. Now, it may have been that small amount of alcohol triggered it. It may have been completely unrelated, because people have anxiety on some days and don't have it on others, and it's not all related to alcohol. But it was a bit strange that, and I've solved the problem in that I don't have it again. So I don't really care whether it was caused by the 0.5% of alcohol or not. You don't have to have it. You don't have to have alcohol-free beer. So if it's a worry or a concern, don't have it, and you don't have a worry or concern. It's as simple as that. Strategies for dealing with cravings. Well, more so controlling the crazy internal mental fight that feels like a set of scales that once it tips in favour of drinking, there's no stopping it, and how to prevent it tipping in the first place. So this is probably possibly a whole topic in and of itself. If you're making a conscious decision about something, you weigh up the pros and cons and you come to the best decision you can, and it might be the right decision, it might be the wrong decision, but you come to a decision. But sometimes a lot of our decisions are made in the subconscious. So, and I've given the example in the book about if you're a driver and you're in a passenger seat in a car, and the person who's driving is driving too fast or too close to the vehicle in front, you find your right leg keep tensing. And that's your subconscious, because your subconscious has picked up over the years that if you tense your right leg, the vehicle slows down. So a lot of decisions are made by your subconscious. Now, there is a different dynamic here, in that sometimes you can decide, your brain decides you're going to have a drink in your subconscious, and all you're really doing consciously is finding a reason to do it, an excuse. Okay, and I do, again, this is a bit of a complicated one. I think I deal with it in a lot of detail in Alcohol Explained too, but this isn't you deciding, shall I have a drink, shall I not have a drink? Your brain's already decided you're going to have a drink, and all you're doing is looking for an excuse to justify it. And that's what you described there about it feels like the scales have tipped. They have tipped. The decision is made. You're going to have a drink, and all you're really doing, I call it the search for excuses. You're just, oh, I don't care, I'm really unhappy, I'll be fine this time, I don't care, I just want a bit of relief. So whatever it is, you're looking for an excuse. And that's that panicked feeling, that crazy internal mental flight you're talking about there. Don't forget as well, humans can only think of so many things at the same time. I read somewhere that you can think of 7 things at the same time. And if you think of an 8th thing, you forget about another one of those things. You only think about 7 things. Now, I don't know, it may be 7 or 6 or whatever. But the fact of the matter is, you can only think of a certain number of things at the same time. Okay, and when you get into that crazy internal mental fight that you call it, I call it the search for excuses, that kind of panic thinking, you start to think of hundreds of different things like, oh, I don't care, I just want some relief at the moment, and I'm really upset about this. Or all you need to do is fill your brain up with 7 flimsy excuses to drink, and you'll drink, because you don't have any space in your brain to think of any reasons not to. And that, again, is what that panic thinking is. It's just like picking stuff up. Is this an excuse to drink? No. Is this an excuse? And keep picking things up until, oh, here's an excuse, here's an excuse, here's an excuse. And you've got 7 of them, and your brain's filled up of 7 reasons to drink, and there's no reasons not to, because you can't think about any more than those 7. So how to prevent it tipping in the first place? There's a few ways here. One of them is certainty. And Alan Carr taught us this back in the 80s with his smoking book. If you can get someone, whether they're happy to stop something or not, but they know they are going to go through with it no matter what, they don't go through that process, because the decision is never made. If you're 100% certain you're not going to do it, it's very hard to get to that process. And a lot of his books that's what it's about. It's about picking people up and giving them the confidence to really believe they're never going to do something again. And if you can get to that place of knowing you're not going to do it again, you just don't go through that panicked feeling. You can stop it. It does happen. It feels like you can't do it, but when you get to that situation, you can tip it back. Okay, you can do it. It's hard because the decision is made and you need to reverse it. But the first thing you need to do is stop that panicked feeling. Okay, so you need to, if you can meditate. But just all meditation is emptying your mind of conscious thought. So take a massive breath or count to 10 or something and just try to stop. And try and have a bit of a reset. But yeah, ideally you don't get there in the first place. I better crack on because I've done 40 minutes already. I always think these are going to be quick, and they never are. Hi William, I posted this today and would love to hear your thoughts and tips on this. Not sure how this is going to go down, but it's a serious question for me. I'm 89 days alcohol free and have no desire to drink. Good. Haven't smoked for nearly 4 years. Good. Exercise. Good. And generally feel happy with the new me. But sometimes I just want to escape from being so good for a moment. I wondered if anyone else felt like this. Does it make any sense? Yes, it absolutely does make sense, because of something called self-image. So this is how we perceive ourselves. Self-image is a really powerful thing, and we act in accordance with our self-image, whatever that self-image may be. But for all of us here who have been heavy drinkers, for the years we've been drinking, we are building up a self-image of a drinker. And a self-image of a drinker is often kind of a bit irresponsible, a bit crazy, risk takers, people that just don't care about how long they live. They just want to enjoy life and what you call, just want to escape from being so good, being kind of a bad lad a bit. It happened to me. So last week, I just done the live, and I went to put it onto YouTube. And it must have been from one of my previous searches, but there was a documentary on Oliver Reed on there. And I made the mistake of starting watching it, and it really set me off again, because it's that kind of bad boy, heavy drinking kind of image. And that's another thing we actually need to do when we stop drinking. You need to change your self-image. And that sounds like a classic thing of what you've done there. You've massively improved your life, but maybe you still have that self-image of, a bit of a bad lad or a risk taker or whatever, and you're still kind of tying it in with that. And again, that's not wanting to keep ragging on about the books, but I did do a chapter in that in Alcohol Explained too about self-image. And you do need to work a bit about changing your self-image, because as I say, when we drink, we like to justify it by building a self-image of a drinker, and then you stop drinking, but a lot of the times you still have that self-image of a drinker, and it may not be as obvious as I want to go out drinking all the time, but as you say there, just to escape from being so good, being a bit irresponsible, a bit silly, a bit crazy, doing something a bit risky, whatever that might be. So it might be something to think about, just what your self-image is and how you want to think about that. And don't forget, you can do those things without drinking. You can be a bit crazy and a bit silly and a bit stupid without drinking. So you might look for another way of doing it if that's something you feel that's missing from your life. The next one is alcoholescence. So I have to apologise on this because this looks absolutely fantastic. So something that's quite interesting is there's over 10,000 members in the group at the moment. And I can kind of do a brief analytical thing on it to see age groups and sex and country and all the rest of it. It gives you a bit of an insight into things. And as you'd expect, I think the main age range is kind of 40s to 50s or 60s or something. They tend to be the biggest chunk. But alcoholescence it's specifically for younger people, which, if you think about it, is a fantastic thing to do, because years ago, how alcohol worked was you drank and drank and drank and drank and drank till you were horribly addicted to it, and then you tried to stop. Whereas these days, people are being a bit more sensible. They're realising much earlier on that this isn't quite what it's cracked up to be. So they're stopping or not all of them, but a lot of people are stopping before it becomes a massive problem. And so this is fantastic. So Alcoholescence is an online platform specifically aimed at those in their 20s and 30s who are thinking about their relationship with alcohol. So there are people in the group of that age group, and this absolutely might be something to look forward to. I've looked at it and it does look very good. The website's www.alcoholescence.com, ALCOLESCENTS. And the reason I need to apologise is because they asked me to do an Instagram post, which I said I'd do, and I'm just abysmal with Instagram, so I haven't quite worked it out. I know to post a picture, but I've got no idea how you post like a link. It seems weird to have a platform where you can't post links to it, but that's Instagram for some reason, which is one of the reasons I just don't click with it. But anyway, yeah, so that might be worth checking out for anyone there. Sorry, I've lost my notes now. There we go. So the next one is... Right, so hi William, thanks for doing this. Your book is life-changing. That's great to hear. Thank you. Going on 3 weeks, excellent. I have small children, 3 and 4. How, besides by leading example, do we prevent the next generation from falling into the alcohol trap? So leading by example, I think, is the biggest thing. And I didn't quite appreciate it till after I'd stopped, in that children do copy their adult, their adult mentors, their role models massively. And even if kids hate their parents and can't get away from them quick enough, they learn from them whether they like it or not. When you're brought up in a household where people are drinking all the time, that's what you do. And so leading by example is the biggest thing. In terms of anything else, so my children are 7 and 9, and I talk to them about alcohol in much the same way I talk to anyone about it, in that people drink it because it makes them feel a bit more relaxed, but when it wears off, it makes them feel anxious, so they need another drink of that, another dose to take away that anxious feeling. And I've explained a similar thing with smoking as well, because obviously they see people smoking and ask about it, and they know it kills you, so they're like, why do you do it if it kills you? And I sort of explained it's addictive, and then we had a conversation about what addictive means. And I think the best way to explain it is it's like being really hungry. Imagine you're really, really hungry for something, whereas if you're hungry for food, you're hungry for something that's good for you. When you're addicted to something, you're hungry for a poison. It's extremely difficult to stop when you start. And that's how I talk to them, and I say exactly the same about alcohol. And I know some people don't like to do that, and I've heard people say that they want their children to have like a healthy relationship with alcohol. I don't see a healthy relationship with alcohol because it's addictive, and I think the only healthy relationship you can have with alcohol is to never have it. And that goes for problem drinkers, so-called normal drinkers, anyone. I would be very happy if my children never touched an alcoholic drink. I don't think it's likely. They may well drink, but that's how I deal with it. I explain it to them that way. And they'll either take my advice or not, I guess. The next one is counting days helpful or not. It's a personal choice, counting days. Some people find it extremely useful. Some people are of the opinion, I have stopped drinking, I'm never going to drink again. I don't count days, it makes no odds to me because I'm never going to drink again. I think the one thing I would say is do whatever you need to do to stop drinking, counting days is usually, to me, an indicator of the health or otherwise of someone's sobriety, because if people are clinging on to each day and clinging to the next one, better to do that than start drinking again, don't get me wrong, but for me it's not a particularly good sign that they're really happy not drinking and they're going to be successful. I would say it's probably helpful if you're using it as a celebration of how far you've come, but it is a personal thing. So I didn't count days when I stopped, but I still remember the day I stopped on because it was just after Valentine's Day 2014. So it's kind of stuck in my mind. So every year when I get around to sort of February, I kind of think, oh, that's another year gone. But it's a very personal thing. We're a bit short on time now, which is a shame because the next one's Sinclair method. And again, that's probably something I could talk for a very long time on. I have a knee-jerk reaction to taking a pill to cure addiction. Okay, as I said, for me, the crux of addiction is believing you need a drug to cope with or enjoy life. Okay, and the cure for that is to reperceive that drug, to see it in a completely different way so that you no longer want it. A pill cannot do that. Okay, the Sinclair method is something, as I've never done it, admittedly, so I'm not going to speak from experience. I've spoken to people who have done it. Some people find it worked, some people find it didn't. Somebody I spoke to said it made them feel decidedly unpleasant, which to me sounds abysmal, because one of the best things about quitting drinking is waking up feeling alive and present and happy and ready to go and mentally strong. And if you're taking another drug that makes you feel a bit drowsy, you're robbing yourself of the very best part of sobriety. So that feels wrong. Lots of people swear by it and say they wouldn't be sober now without it. But my concern is, how are you changing your mindset? How are you... So if you believe that a night out with friends isn't as much fun if you're not drinking, how does a pill change that? I don't understand. And also what I don't get is, if you have a really bad day and you want a drink, I don't get why you don't just not take the pill and have the drink. I don't follow the logic with it, but having said that, I've never tried it. But as I say, I've got I do have concerns with it. So the last one, I'm having alcohol-free cider at night. Could this cause insomnia as I've gone back to having terrible night's sleep? Could it be sugar? Yeah, it could be, because I bought some alcohol-free fruit-flavoured cider once, and I had one of them, and it was so nice. And I put a post on Instagram about it, and someone said, have you seen how much sugar's in there? And I looked at the label, and I forget now how much it was, but it was a ridiculous amount of sugar. It was like more than a Mars bar or something, like drinking syrup. So it absolutely could be disturbing your night's sleep, because refined sugar does a very similar thing to alcohol, in that it gives you a boost, but then it makes you feel really drained and tired afterwards. But essentially what it's doing, it's just messing up your normal equanimity or internal equanimity, which it could very well be spoiling your night's sleep. Simple way, stop taking it and see if you start to sleep a bit better. I suspect you might do, because as I say, if it's anything like the one I had, there was a massive amount of sugar in it. So they're all the questions that were posed previously. I'm just going to have a look now and see if I can see anything, any questions that have been posted there. So someone's asked about, so these are all on YouTube. All of these videos I put on YouTube. So it's YouTube, the Alcohol Explained channel. So I upload them all onto YouTube. So they should all be on there, going right back to the beginning. And I think that's pretty much it. Doesn't seem to be too many other questions there. So what I will do, apologies, because I posted the post about this week's live a bit late, because I completely forgot about it yesterday. I've had a bit too much on recently. So what I'll do, I'll try to remember to post again next Thursday morning. If anyone's got any ideas for specific topics, I'm happy to do that, because the last couple I did one on moderation and one on addressing the underlying problems that cause us to drink. So if anyone's got any particular topics they think would be useful, I wasn't sure whether to do one on weight loss, because that seems to come up quite regularly, or even normal drinkers and what is a normal drinker. something like that. Or if not, I can just do questions, so whatever people are happier with. So yeah, I hope everyone enjoyed that, and I will post next week for next Friday, so I'll post Thursday morning, and if I if I forget, do feel free to tag me in something and ask me. Have a good weekend, everyone. See you next week.